I'm back, and let's talk about TerraMaster 2024 new NAS lineup. We're going to focus on this F8 SSD Plus. This is a small and lightweight NAS as you're seeing right now, and as the name implied, it uses SSD. What's really cool about this NAS is inside there are 8 slots, 4 M.2 NVMe SSDs that you can populate all of them and combine them in a variety of RAID format that you can choose, creating a large and low latency storage pool. This is something really crucial because there is no more spinning drive. You don't have to really wait that long for you to access your data compared to the mechanical NAS drive. And that's something that I really enjoy about using this particular NAS. What I'm going to do is show you what comes in the box. I'll go over the hardware. We're going to dissect this. And I'll also go over the new software that they have launched, TOS 6 or TerraMaster OS 6, which is a huge improvement compared to what I have reviewed from TerraMaster before. In fact, I really think that this generation for their product is really making them a really great contender for many creative out there. And hopefully I can answer some of the questions you may have about this drive too. So let's get started. This is ArtIsRight. Before we start, subscribe if you're new and hit on the bell icon so you'll be notified every time I upload cool new videos like this. I'd like to share with you a quick update. Many of you that follow the channel will know that I've taken a break from YouTube. I am back now, however, in a limited capacity. The numbers of videos that I'll be releasing at this point in time won't be as many as I did before the break, but you will be seeing new videos from me. There'll be product reviews like I'm doing now. I'll be doing tutorials and also sharing you some videos of the conventions I'll be visiting, either on behalf of BenQ or talking about color management or both. And I think it's going to be really great just to interact with many of you again via these new videos. I know that many of you still comment and ask questions. I'm still answering those questions, so I appreciate that you're still asking those questions on the video on my channel. With that said, there's really a lot to tell you, and I will be filming a separate video just to talk about the break, the whole reason behind it, and where ArtIsRight is going in the future. But for now, what I really want to do is talk about this TerraMaster F8 SSD Plus. So let's start out with my full disclosure. TerraMaster have sent me this NAS to do a review. All the opinions you're about to hear are going to be my own. They did not pay me to do this NAS review. The only thing they sent me is the NAS. All the NVMe drives that goes on the inside of this NAS are ones that I have to provide. So like I said, TerraMaster only sent me the NAS. So now let's talk about what comes in the box. So you get a whole bunch of paperwork. You even get a little pamphlet that talks about their current new NAS lineup. And one thing that I will say before I talk about what comes in the box about their new NAS lineup, and I have observed many of them already, is that they have really taken the customer feedback and really implemented in their hardware where it now makes a lot of sense the way how they're doing things. You no longer have to take apart the entire chassis of a NAS to update the RAM or install an NVMe SSD for caching. You can just simply open one side now, and that's an improvement that's really great to see. In addition to this, they have also released TerraMaster OS 6 or TOS 6, which does come with a lot of improvement that I really like. Now, let's talk about what comes in the box. So you get the little warranty card, you get a quick start guide, and what they're also doing is giving $100 off as a promotion for these new fall NAS. So I will leave a link to all these various NAS in the description that you can check out. It comes with an Ethernet cable that you can link the NAS up to your network, and what you do get is pretty much the NAS itself, a power brick. These are your standard 2-prong as you're seeing right now. But what I really like about TerraMaster is that on every single one of their power brick, even though they give you a generic power brick, that is a generic brand, they always either put a sticker or put a Velcro on their power brick, and it always say TerraMaster. I wish more companies would do this, because if you have many power bricks like this, it's hard to match them back with a device if you did not label them on day one. And yes, I suffer from that too, and TerraMaster have always done a fantastic job with this. So I just want to briefly mention that. In addition to this, they also give you the other hardwares. For example, they gave you the thermal pad that needs to go in between the NVMe SSDs, and they also give you the heatsink as you're seeing now. The way how they want you to mount the heatsink though to the NVMe SSDs, I think is a little bit cumbersome, and I find it a little bit more difficult. They just give you these rubber bands that you have to pretty much stretch to wrap around your heatsink and NVMe SSDs, and they're not the easiest one to put on, especially with delicate components. So my personal opinion would be to get an NVMe SSD that already has a heatsink on it, or if you don't do that, I would look at third-party heatsink that you can clamp it down together with a screw or something that is going to be a little bit more durable than the one that is included. So just something to think about there. And there's one more thing that I'm going to mention about these heatsink too, but I'll do that when we get into the full teardown of this device. Now, this particular NAS is built from TerraMaster as a tool list. However, they still include a really small screwdriver that has a Phillips head on there because you still need to screw down the NVMe SSD to the board. All right, with that said, what I'm going to do is let's focus on this a little bit more. And what we have, this is pretty much a NAS. On the top is an air vent. There's a little power button there. These are all the four sides. The back side of it have all the I/O port. We'll cover that in just a moment. And on the bottom, there's two fans. So the fan sucks the air in from the bottom and vent it towards the top. In running this, the fan does run. And even though I set at a high speed, it does not run at a high pitch or anything like that, which is really great to see. And most of the time, if you just turn this on in an environment like I am in right now in my studio, which is fairly quiet, you're not really going to notice the fan running that much at all. All right, let's talk about some of the ports in the back and what we do with this. So first of all, we have that little screw there. This is pretty much a thumb screw to release the outer shell from the NAS internal, which I'll show you that in just a moment, but I'm going to release this screw now. Up from there, we have this barrel connector, DC in 12 volts. We have an HDMI. The HDMI is really used mostly for diagnostic. For a majority of us, we're not really going to be using the HDMI, and once you plug in, it's really just all command lines. Just like I said, used for diagnostic. If something doesn't work right, you can plug in HDMI to your monitor, plug in a keyboard to a USB, and you can type some commands in, but that's going to have to be done through their support. It also comes with 10 gigabit Ethernet right out of the box. That's something really great to see. 2 USB Type A, 10 gigabits per second, and 1 USB Type C, 10 gigabits per second. Do note that these are not meant to run as a bridge, meaning that you can't just plug this in and use it as a direct storage. All the connection for the storage has to be done through the Ethernet connection. And with that said, the way how we open this up is to simply push on the bottom like so. You will see this case sliding out. I'll do that one more time. From the top down view, and you can see that right now. So it just slides out just like so. This case itself is made out of plastic polycarbonate. It's pretty strong, it's pretty durable. You can see right now that there's pretty much like minimal flex. I mean, there's some, but once you have the frame in there, it is pretty strong. So not so much something that I am going to worry about much. So this is pretty much on one side of the NAS. What you do have are all these 4 slots for NVMe M.2 SSDs you're seeing right now. I'm only populating mine with 3, and you do need the screwdriver in order for you to unscrew the holder and screw it back in. So it's not fully toolless as they have mentioned. The other thing I also want to talk about is the fact that they include a DDR5 16 gigabyte SODIMM in here, and this is a single RAM slot. So if you want to upgrade to 32 gigabyte, this 16 gigabyte have to go, and you have to put a 32 gigabytes RAM in. The only one feedback or the only one comment I have about the TerraMaster RAM is that they don't disclose the speed of the RAM. So what they recommend are all the TerraMaster brands, and they are starting to do, I would say, a slight system lock-in, and this is something that they have done in their past NAS as well, so this is nothing new. But my assumption would be that if you put in another 32 gigabyte DDR5, it should work too, and you can put in a fast one because it will also probably be backward compatible. I'm not 100% sure about that, but that's just one thing I'm not really particularly liking about it, is they start to lock in their NAND array. Now, they haven't locked in their SSDs or NVMEs yet, which is a really great thing to see. So it still is an open format. On the back side of this, as I flip this around, you have 4 more slots for 4 more M.2 NVMe SSDs. 4 in the back, 4 in the front, total 8. You can install up to 8 terabyte NVMe SSDs. So 8 times 8 is 64 terabytes. So you can have 64 terabyte of extremely low latency, fast storage inside this NAS. A couple of thoughts that I have about this particular NAS is you don't need to buy the top tier high-end NVMe SSDs because the speed of this NAS alone is still going to be limited to around 1 gigabytes per second because of the 10 GB SSD, 10 gigabit Ethernet connection. So you can put the fastest NVMe SSD in here. Is not going to change the speed much, but that is something to just really think about when you're populating this. So I would probably buy the larger one and not necessarily the one that can go the fastest that costs more. Now I'm going to take mine apart a little bit and show you two different solutions for the heatsink mounting. So this is the first one. This is using my Samsung drive. This is a 2 terabyte. It only has the NAND chip and the controller on one side only. So using their heatsink is actually not a bad thing. You can see it's using a rubber band right now. I'm not really digging it, but it works just fine for a 2 terabyte NVMe SSDs. However, when you start to use NVMe SSDs that have higher capacity, for instance, such as 4 or 8 terabytes, one thing you're going to find out is that there are NANDs on the backside too. And these particular heat sinks don't really work well for double side. So this, I got a third-party one that will sandwich between both sides of the NVMe SSDs and pretty much dissipate the heat from there. So you can install it on the other side, but there's not enough clearance really. So if you have a 4 or 8 terabyte NVMe SSDs, I would just get third-party solution. The one that I have, I'll show you this in just a moment, is also mounted on via these screws and is in there pretty tightly, and I feel much more comfortable with that compared to this solution. So just something of a thought there. Otherwise, when you really want to put this back in the case, is as simple as just sliding the heatsink fan in like so. Just make sure you align the ports, because you can totally slide this in the opposite direction as you're seeing right now, and it will go in, it will seat in there, but you're not going to get the ports. So just pay attention to the port side of it. It's not grooved, it's not done in a way that you can only put it in one direction only. All right, with that said, oh, one more thing I forgot to mention is there's also a little pinhole for the reset button there, and this just pretty much thumb ties it down like so. That's pretty much the hardware for the F8 SSD Plus. Now, the other one thing I want to really briefly cover is that there is the F8 SSD Plus as you're seeing right now, but they also make another one called the F8 SSD without the Plus. The variation between that model comes down to the chip that they're putting on the inside of the device, and also the amount of memory. Everything else is pretty much the same. So for this particular one, the Plus, they have put in an Intel Core i3 N305. However, for the non-Plus model, they're using an Intel N95. So less capabilities. The N95 only have 4-core CPU, where this one has 8-core CPU. So it does have higher burst speed, and it also has more cores to do all the different computes that you want to do, especially if you want to do virtualization or if you want to run a lot of Dockers. I think the Plus model is definitely the one to consider. Both of them can be upgraded 32 gigabytes of memory, although the Plus one comes with 16 gigabytes of memory. The non-Plus only comes with 8 gigabytes of memory. And down the road, I'll probably be testing a third-party 32 gigabytes RAM in here, so I'll be updating that on a future video. But for now, what I'd like to do is power this up and link it up to the system, or my computer rather, so that we can talk about TOS 6, which I think is a huge improvement. So we have come to the last part, which is the software review of TOS 6. Now, what I'd like to do first is talk about the orientation that you want to use this NAS in. I have this plug-in. I haven't powered it on yet because there's something that I do want to show you, but on the bottom there are 2 rubber feet and there are 2 fans. So the fans are designed to bring the air in from the bottom and vent it towards the top. However, being that this is an NVMe SSD NAS, there are no moving parts, you can certainly run them in a horizontal format like that, although they do slide around a little bit more because there are no rubber feet, and you can put them on either side. They're going to be fine. On the top though, I do not recommend that you turn your NAS upside down like this, because there's no way for the air to vent. That's not going to work really well. Secondly, the moment you do that, you're going to trigger the power button on the very top and turn the NAS off. Now, the way how this NAS turn on, simply you press the power button. It's going to beep once, like so, and once the operating system has initiated, it's going to beep one more time. So we're going to give it a moment for that to happen. It does take some time for it to boot up, but right now I have also have this NAS set into a variable fan speed, or automatic, meaning that if it's not running that hot, the fan won't even turn on. So you have a fully silenced NAS, and even when you're accessing the file, if you're not really using it that heavily and your environment is cooler, fans most likely won't even turn on. And that's one thing nice about this is there are no spinning mechanical drive. It's just literally all NAND chips, all electronics, just electricity. And that's something that's really cool about it. So what I'm going to do is, for now, I'm going to run this in a horizontal format as you're seeing, and we're still waiting for the second beep to come up. Now I have this NAS link up to my laptop right now via an adapter that's using a Thunderbolt connection. Normally what I would do for this is link this NAS up to my 10 gigabit Ethernet switch, and we just heard the second beep. That means the operating system is ready. So I'm going to show you the browser in just a moment. But when I do have the full link set up and I'm running a speed test and everything, I'm getting close to 8 gigabytes per second. Like I said, right now the fan is not even running. So for any type of musician, if you want to have this close to you, if your computer is close to you in a sound recording studio, this is going to work just fine. But if you definitely are not sure if the fan's going to kick in or not, what you can simply do is put this in the server room. And that's the magic about having a NAS, is you can pretty much access anywhere you are in the network, and provided you have 10 gigabit Ethernet set up, you can still access the NAS at full speed. If you are a video pro, one thing I'll say right now is shooting compressed format in a variety of 4Ks frame per second, you should be fine. And when I say 4K frame per second, that means like 60 to 120 shouldn't be a problem at all. However, if you do use higher frame rates and you shoot in RAW 4K or raw 8K, I would definitely evaluate your workflow before you look into this, because the 10 gigabit Ethernet connection may end up becoming the limiter to your workflow, and that's going to be, mileage may vary depending on the type of RAW from whatever camera that you may be using. Lastly, we're going to talk about photography workflow. Now for photography, this is a great non-volatile storage. I mean, it's pretty much like no spinning disk, so your files are mostly safe. Doesn't mean that NVMe's are not going to fail, but the opportunity of them failing are definitely much less likely. That being said though, if you are a photographer and you use Lightroom Classic like I do, there's one big problem, and you can't store your Lightroom catalog on this NAS. You need to either run the Lightroom catalog from the internal drive on your computer, or a directly attached external SSD, or a dock with an SSD attached to your computer. So that's the one requirement for Lightroom Classic. And one of the things that I will say is there are different ways to go in and change a network protocol so that the drive mounts more like a local drive rather than a network drive. However, the opportunity of failure and corruption for the catalog might be there, and I would not recommend you doing it, especially when Adobe gone out of their way to just block you from doing that. That's something that I don't recommend. But otherwise, you know, if you can get around that workflow, which I am working around these workflow right now during this testing, you're going to be just fine. And any other type of creative discipline that just really is storing the files, for example, graphic designers, you're going to be fine doing animation 3D work. This is going to be a really great NAS because you can create a large storage pool and you can access that data fast. For the most part, if the NAS is on, it's not asleep, you can access the data right away. And if you're doing video, you don't have to wait until the hard drive spins to that portion of video. So scrubbing is pretty much instantaneous with this NVMe SSD NAS. Now you got to think about it this way. Some of the NAS that have hard drive use NVMe SSD as a caching, and there's algorithm to really figure out the files you're accessing, loading them into the cache so you can access it faster. With this particular NAS, because they're all NVMe's M.2 SSDs, it's just like having an instantaneous cache for all of your files. So if a drive is on, the access is fast. However, if the system does fall asleep, and you can set it to never fall asleep, but if a system does fall asleep, it does take a moment for it to wake up. But once it wakes up, you can access your file with extremely low latency. And like I said, scrubbing is really smooth for any type of video workflow for that matter. So what I'm going to do now is log into TOS 6 to kind of show you around a little bit. And like I said, compared to the previous version, they have polished this a lot. In a sense though, I will say that their interface have gone to a little bit more simple and just graphical only, as you're seeing right now. I've also set it up so that my wallpaper on the login screen and the wallpaper on the desktop once I log into TOS 6 is the same, which is the reason why we're seeing it looking like this. But pretty much what we have is a start menu that you can access App Center, File Manager, all the applications you have installed on your system, backup, control panel, support, security. And you have most of the shortcuts at the very top. On the side, you just have simple controls. For example, the dashboard which you can go into configure to show system info, networking, brought network throughput and hardware. I'll confirm that, and that should be coming in just a moment. It's not taking it right now. There we go. It just takes a little bit to respond on this one, but it does come through. As you can see, you can get a report on your system. This is the LAN, this is the WAN connection that you have there. It's running smoothly, CPU, what it needed, the network I/O, the volume, and also the fan is actually running at this point in time because I just turned the NAS on. But if you just actually have the NAS sitting in idle, sometimes you can observe the fan not even just running altogether where the speed is 0. These are a notification. It does provide the update for the OS, and I'm just going to go and trash all the notifications right now. Close that out. And lastly, we do have the help option. This is where it would link you to TerraMaster, but what we're going to do is not use that and jump back to the tab where we're just looking at TOS 6. So you can contact their support and their support team. I mean, their chat's pretty good. You can do it that way. There is an app store, so you can go in there and it's going to load all the various applications you can install on your system. And in fact, they also have a local TOS interface that you can install on Windows too. So I think that's really nice, but you can see there's all these cloud sync. I've only installed a few of them. I haven't even installed Docker on this one because most of the time the usage that I have for my NAS is super simple. It's using as a file server, mostly to access my file as I'm editing. But I like the NAS because you have multiple computers accessing it at the very same time. This is something that you want to think about, whether you're just going to be the only person accessing it, and if you prefer to use it through the network so any other computer can link up to it without you setting a computer on and sharing a drive, this is definitely the way to go. Another thing that I do want to mention though is that MB and also Plex Media Server, both of them are available natively on TerraMaster OS, so that's really great to see. All right, so what I'd like to do now is just quickly go over the control panel, which is mostly where the user interface of what we have is, and this is pretty much what we're seeing. So we have all the regular user group. We can create share folders, and the way how they have designed this, I think, is a really great improvement compared to what have come before with TOS 5 and the NAS that I have been testing from TerraMaster. This is the network, different file services. You can do remote access. The one thing that I do want to caution on remote access is, yes, you can set up remote access, you can set up a TerraMaster ID. However, linking your NAS with remote access enabling, you have to think about the repercussions of it, because I think that enabling NAS for remote access, it just really depends. If you really need it, you can certainly do it. However, most of the time I discourage it because your NAS is already linked up to the internet. By enabling the remote access, you're opening up another protocol. And most of the time it comes down to a question of when, not if it's going to happen. So you might go through your entire NAS usage without having it happen, and that when never hits. However, it may hit at some point in time, and you don't want to be part of either a ransomware or data breach. Now, I'm not saying that TerraMaster has a flaw in their OS, but with any computer operating system, with any operating system for that matter, there's always flaw, and we have seen that happen with other NAS before. So that's something that I would consider. So that's something that you can do. You can also set the DNS up for access, but what I really want to show you right now are pretty much the volume. Right now, I have 3 NVMe SSD on the inside, M.2s, and the way how I have this stored up is set up into one storage pool. This is pretty much on a RAID 0, and this is 4 terabyte, 4 terabyte, and 2 terabyte. Now, the reason why I run this in RAID 0 is because I want to maximize the space on my NAS. That's number one. And secondly, I have this NAS back up to another NAS that I don't have to worry if the data on here is gone because I have a secondary set of backup. Do remember, because you have set up your RAID as a redundancy, it's not a backup. So remember the 3-2-1 on your backup so that you are definitely safe from data loss and everything else. So just remember that particular part. Now, for this one, I have 2 WD Black 4 terabyte and 1 Samsung 980 Pro 2 terabyte. Combine all these together, I get 9.07 because there are some overheads. Even though it's reporting the full capacity, it's really using 1024 bits to do the calculation. So when you're really getting the actual capacity is based on that and not based on the 1000 round up numbers for the bit computation. So just something to be aware of there. These are pretty much showing you all the disks, and I can just see the overall for all the 8 bays, how they are performing. Are they defected? Are they in risk or particularly at risk? There is some odd language being used here, but this has been minimized down compared to TOS 5 that I have tested before. And regarding this itself, this is NVMe disk 1. You can go in and see the stat. You can see the temperature of the disk and everything. In fact, they also have the Iron Wolf health management. You can get the data directly from here. You can do the log, you can do the smart. There are virtual disk USB device that you plug in. You can have a hot spare set up. I don't have any hot spare. And I can always go in and add more NVMEs later on or swap them out and so forth. This is something that I can easily do. So what I really want to cover are just a few more things, and that is particularly the hardware and power. I have the buzzer going, so when the system fails, when something happens, it will notify me. But right now, I have the fan working mode set to automatic. And as we can see, because the temperature is up there in like the 40 degrees, it's still running. However, if you leave this for a while, it does stop. Now, if I set the fan speed to low, which is pretty much running on low right now, even though it's on automatic, I'm not really hearing it. So if I stop talking, it's almost imperceptible from the normal environment noise. If I go to medium, I can hear the hum a little bit more. If I go to full speed, I can definitely hear the hum, but it's not a high speed pitch sound or something like that from some of the fans that I've seen before or heard before. Now, the disk sleep itself, I have this set up to 30 minutes. So the disk, it does put the NAS to sleep, and it does take a moment for it to come on, but once it comes on, scrubbing and file accessing is pretty much instantaneous. So just something to be aware there. You can schedule tasks, you can view the notification here or setting up the settings for notification. There are security settings for the logout time, different firewalls and so forth, DDoS. You can go ahead and set all those. And this is where the system is for updating configuration. In fact, you can also use this to reset your system or restore it to factory default, should you want to do that. And there are other access on the system info that will tell you everything you need to know about your system. For instance, this is pretty much repeating the information that we can access from the sidebar. The one thing that I will say though is that overall their interface is based on a lot of graphical user interface without any way to go in and enable wordings underneath it. And to those of you that may be newer to a NAS system or a NAS OS, it can be confusing at first. Gravitating towards the gear is kind of almost like the universal thing that you can do to go into the settings. But for instance, you know, right here, you can see on the sidebar, it's just literally a control just like that. You can pop this in and out like what I've just done there, but it's not really quite as explanatory. You can hover over a symbol as you're seeing right now, and I can see reboot, I can see shutdown, and I can see log out. But nonetheless, there are no words on the bottom, and there's really no way, or at least I haven't seen a way for me to go in and say, I want to have these controls and the labels on the bottom. So that's just one feedback to TerraMaster. If there's any way to enable the labels system-wide for anyone who's newer to an NAS, I think that would be great. For me, I don't have any problem. I just kind of just jump into it. And I like this interface and what they're doing with this a lot more than the previous version. But that's just something to keep in mind. And you can see these are pretty much the recent applications. I can go into all applications. It's going to launch that square with a rounded edge rainbow there from purple to green. And it's going to take a moment for it to load. And you can see I've installed Plex server already. I've done some testing on here. I didn't install that many apps yet, but that's certainly something that you can do. So what I'm going to do right now, because I'm about to wrap this up, is I will turn off and shut down this device. But that is pretty much F8 SSD Plus in a nutshell. I think the TerraMaster have done a really great job this time around, releasing NAS that are compelling, that are different than what the others are doing, and also improving upon what they have in terms of their offering, the hardware on the NAS, the way how they're designing it overall, because I've seen how the drive ones are opening up. Like I mentioned before, you can open it up on the side now to update the memory. You can open it on the side now to update or install the NVMe SSDs without having to take apart the entire device. That's great. They've done a lot of great job polishing TOS 6, and I think this is really putting them on a map. And if you're looking for something that is fast, low latency, no spinning drive, that you can set into a variety of RAID, I think this is a great way of looking at it. and a great product to be looking at. One more thing that I do want to mention about TerraMaster, something that are doing that is really great, is that they also have a proprietary RAID called T-RAID. And with T-RAID, it's very similar to a few other brands that they have out there, which what they do is you can use multiple size NVMe SSDs or multiple size disks. And when you put them together, normally if you set it to a traditional RAID with a backup, what it's going to do is that even though you may have, for example, a larger drive, is going to make all those larger drive equivalent to that smallest drive that you have. T-RAID overcome all those issues. And what you can do with T-RAID is mix and match all of those, and it will give you the maximum capacity possible. Do remember though that T-RAID is a proprietary RAID, so if something happens to it, if you need to do data recovery, it might be more difficult. And my recommendation is even though you have redundancy in your NAS, is to get a backup. But I'm really also glad that TerraMaster is doing the T-RAID thing, which gives it the advantage to anyone who have multiple mixed drive, but also want to use it in a way that I'm not using it. Like I said, I have mine to RAID 0, but you can use it in a way that you have redundancy and you can use mixed capacity drive and get the most out of them. So like I said, anyway, F8 SSD Plus, I think, is definitely a great, compelling NAS to consider. If you have any questions or comment, leave them below. Give this a like, subscribe, and hit the bell if you're new. I'm Art, and I thank you for your time.